The landscaping business was my life's work, 5 years of 4 a.m. starts, bloodied hands, and turning a rusty lawnmower into a fleet of trucks with our family name. Dad always said, "Hard work builds character." But I guess that only applies to the son without children. The day he handed my brother Troy the paperwork saying he has kids to feed, something broke inside me. Sometimes walking away is the hardest choice and the only one. Before I tell you what happened next, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button if family drama keeps you coming back. I can still remember the first time my grandfather showed me how to care for plants. I was 8 years old, standing in our Texas backyard as he demonstrated how to check soil moisture with his calloused fingers. My grandfather had emigrated from Mexico as a young man, and he brought with him an innate understanding of plants that seemed magical to me. Despite growing up in the concrete jungle of Houston, I developed a deep connection to the earth through him. My dad ran a successful construction business building structures that dominated the skyline. He expected me to follow in his footsteps, but I was always more interested in creating beauty than just building function. The disappointment in his eyes was unmistakable when I took a job at Sunshine Nursery during high school instead of working construction sites with him during summer breaks. "Plants don't pay bills, Guadalupe," he would say, shaking his head. But at the nursery, I found a mentor in Frank, the owner who recognized something in me that my father couldn't see. "You've got the touch, kid," Frank would tell me. "You understand that landscaping isn't just about putting plants in the ground. It's about creating living art that changes with the seasons." When I dropped out of community college after just 1 semester to pursue hands-on landscaping work, my dad didn't speak to me for 3 weeks. My mother tried to mediate, but the tension at home became unbearable. I knew I had to forge my own path, even if it meant disappointing the man whose approval I had always sought. At 20 years old, I took the biggest risk of my young life. With $2,000 saved from my nursery job, I purchased a used lawnmower, some basic tools, and printed business cards with the name Guadalupe Landscapes at the local copy shop. The early days were brutal. Sleeping in my beat-up 1998 Ford pickup with my equipment locked in the bed beneath a tarp. I would wake up with the sun, brush my teeth using a water bottle in gas station parking lots, and start knocking on doors by 7 in the morning. My first real client was Mrs. Thornton, an elderly widow who lived in a modest home with a yard that had been neglected since her husband passed. When I handed her my homemade business card, she looked me straight in the eyes instead of at the paper. "You look honest," she said simply, "and I need someone I can trust." Not only did she pay me in advance, but she also referred me to 3 neighbors that first week. I lived on ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches, saving every dollar to upgrade my equipment. That first year aged me in ways I couldn't have imagined. My skin turned leather brown from the relentless Texas sun. My hands developed calluses so thick I could barely feel the blisters underneath, and I lost 20 pounds from the physical labor and irregular meals. Every night, no matter how exhausted I was, I would sit in my truck with a small desk, light meticulously tracking expenses and planning the next day's work. I studied landscaping books borrowed from the library, teaching myself design principles and plant science that I couldn't afford to learn in college. The breakthrough came when I volunteered to redesign the garden at a local church for free. The pastor was so impressed that he recommended me to the owner of a small office building looking for maintenance. My first commercial client meant steady income, and for the first time I could afford to rent a small room instead of sleeping in my truck. By 21, I had established a reputation for creating drought-resistant designs that thrived in the water-conscious Texas environment. My distinctive approach emphasized native plants arranged in natural-looking formations that required minimal irrigation. Clients appreciated my punctuality and the fact that I always left job sites cleaner than I found them. When the Houston Chamber of Commerce awarded me Emerging Small Business Recognition at 23, a local newspaper ran a feature about my company. I framed the article and presented it to my dad, searching his face for any sign of pride. He studied it silently before offering a gruff nod. "At least you're making something of yourself," he said, which was the closest thing to approval I had received in years. With careful saving and a small business loan, I purchased my first company vehicle at 24, a white truck with the Guadalupe Landscapes logo professionally painted on the doors. Seeing that truck parked outside my small apartment gave me a sense of legitimacy I had never felt before. As the business grew, my family slowly became more involved. My dad started offering business advice and occasionally helped with heavy lifting on weekend projects. My mother answered phone calls and handled scheduling after her shifts at the hospital. Even my older brother, Troy, who had always dismissed my work as playing in the dirt, began to take notice as the company expanded. Troy was 8 years older than me and had always been the golden child college, educated with an MBA and a corporate job that allowed him to purchase a house in the suburbs and support his wife and 3 children. Our Sunday family dinners gradually transformed into business strategy sessions, with Troy offering suggestions based on his corporate experience and my dad mediating between our different approaches. When Troy was laid off during corporate downsizing, our family dynamic shifted dramatically. Suddenly, the brother who had looked down on my career choice was struggling to make mortgage payments and feed his 3 kids under 10 years old. During one Sunday dinner, my dad pulled me aside. "Your brother needs help, Guadalupe," he said. "Family takes care of family." By this point, my business had reached its peak. At 26, I employed 8 full-time workers, operated 4 company trucks, and had secured contracts with 3 housing developments and the local mall. I had invested in specialized equipment for large-scale projects and developed an innovative water reclamation system that was gaining attention in the industry. I had just personally invested $50,000, nearly all my savings, in new eco-friendly equipment that would set my company apart from competitors. When my dad suggested that Troy could help manage the business during his unemployment, I hesitantly agreed. After all, Troy had an MBA, and I thought his office experience might complement my field expertise. The initial arrangement was straightforward. Troy would handle administrative tasks, while I continued overseeing operations and design work. From the beginning, there were signs of trouble. Troy showed little interest in learning the fundamentals of landscape design, dismissing my concerns about plant selection and irrigation systems. "Numbers are what matter in business," he would say, waving away my explanations about sustainability and long-term planning. At family gatherings, my dad increasingly emphasized Troy's business credentials, suggesting that my company was finally getting professional management. The warning signs became impossible to ignore when clients began asking me about new management during jobs. Investigating further, I discovered Troy had been rebranding our marketing materials without consulting me, emphasizing Troy and Guadalupe Landscapes, with his name prominently featured. When I confronted him, he dismissed my concerns. "We need a more professional image if we're going to expand," he said. "Dad agrees with me." One Tuesday morning, I arrived at the office I had built from scratch to find file cabinets, locked cabinets, containing designs and client information that I had developed over years. Later that week, I overheard my dad and Troy discussing succession planning when they thought I had left for the day. "He's young, he'll bounce back," my dad said. "Troy has a family to think about." The situation reached breaking point when Troy's wife, Amanda, began making design suggestions to long-term clients without any landscaping background. The clients, confused by the mixed messages, started calling me directly with concerns. Then came the family meeting that changed everything. My mother called with an unusually formal dinner invitation, insisting that I dress nicely and arrive promptly at 6. When I walked into my parents' dining room, I immediately sensed something was wrong. My father sat at the head of the table, hands folded, with Troy beside him, holding a folder of papers. My mother hovered nervously in the kitchen doorway. My dad cleared his throat and launched into what was clearly a rehearsed speech about family responsibility and securing the future. Troy followed with a slideshow presentation about modernizing operations that made my blood run cold. They had been planning this for months. "Your brother has created a new business structure," my dad announced, sliding papers across the table. "I've transferred 70% ownership to Troy. You'll retain 30% and continue handling the field work." When I asked why my father delivered the line that would haunt me for years, "He has 3 kids to feed, Guadalupe. You only have yourself." I felt the blood drain from my face, my hands shaking so badly I had to place them flat on the table to steady them. 5 years of dawn to dusk. Labor of reinvesting every penny, of building something from nothing. All of it transferred to my brother because he had children and I didn't. The next morning, I met with a small business attorney who reviewed my paperwork. Her expression grew increasingly grim as she examined the documents. "The original loan from your father included a clause giving him partial ownership," she explained. "Legally, he could transfer that ownership to anyone." "I'm sorry, Guadalupe." I confronted my father at his construction office the following day, demanding an explanation for his betrayal. His response was simple and cutting. "Blood before business," he said firmly. "Family men have priority. One day, when you have children, you'll understand." My mother called that evening, tears in her voice, begging me to accept the situation and keep the family together. But I knew something fundamental had broken that could never be repaired. Troy wasted no time asserting his new authority. He introduced new employment contracts that reduced my decision-making power to almost nothing. My loyal foreman, Luis, was replaced by Troy's brother-in-law, who had 0 landscaping experience. The equipment maintenance schedule I had meticulously developed was changed to cut costs, putting both equipment and workers at risk. The beautiful, sustainable designs that had built our reputation were simplified to increase profit margins, with Troy insisting that clients wouldn't notice the difference. But they did notice. Complaints began rolling in, and instead of addressing the underlying quality issues, Troy offered discounts that further eroded our profitability. The stress took a physical toll. I lost 15 pounds in a month, lying awake at night, while my mind raced with thoughts of the business I was losing. Former employees called with concerns about safety shortcuts being implemented. Longtime clients requested private consultations, uncomfortable with the changes they were seeing. My personal tools began disappearing from the warehouse, borrowed without permission, for jobs I wasn't overseeing. The situation reached a public breaking point during the unveiling of our biggest project to date, the complete redesign of Westfield Corporate Park. This was a contract I had secured before Troy joined the company, based on detailed sustainability plans I had spent months developing. But when the local newspaper covered the unveiling, Troy was front and center, taking full credit for my design. "Our new management approach emphasizes efficiency and aesthetic impact," he told the reporter, while I stood silently in the background. 3 weeks later, the main water feature malfunctioned, catastrophically flooding the corporate plaza during a business luncheon. I had warned Troy about improper installation methods, even documenting my concerns in writing, but my expertise had been ignored in favor of cost-cutting. At the emergency meeting with Westfield executives, Troy publicly blamed me for poor design, claiming I had failed to account for water pressure variables. My father stood beside him, nodding in agreement, while I sat stunned by the blatant lie. The true breaking point came when Troy decided to use untreated lumber for a children's playground project at a new community center. I wrote a detailed warning about the safety hazards and longevity issues, but Troy dismissed my concerns as unnecessary expenses. "Kids don't care what kind of wood they're climbing on," he said. "They just want something to play on." During the playground opening ceremony, a 6-year-old girl got a 3-inch splinter embedded in her hand, requiring emergency medical attention. When the community center threatened legal action, I discovered Troy had falsified documentation, showing that I had approved the material selection, forging my signature on supply orders I had never seen. The next Sunday dinner became a battleground. I arrived with printouts of safety concerns, financial corner-cutting, and evidence of Troy's mismanagement. I laid them on the table, methodically explaining each issue and its potential consequences for the business. Troy dismissed everything with a wave of his hand. Businesses aren't run on feelings, they're run on numbers. This is why Dad put me in charge. My father, instead of addressing the legitimate concerns I had raised, delivered an ultimatum: get with the program or get out. I looked to my mother for support, but her eyes were fixed on her plate. Her silence told me everything I needed to know about family allegiance. The next morning I arrived at the office before dawn to collect my personal items. Employees watched silently as I emptied my desk, their eyes conveying what they couldn't say aloud. When I went to retrieve my design portfolios, years of creative work, I found the files already emptied. Troy arrived as I was loading the last box into my truck. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "You're making a mistake," he said. "I could keep you on as field supervisor. Lower pay, of course, but you'd still have a job." I walked past him without a word, pausing only to look at the nursery of plants I had personally cultivated for upcoming projects. Some were rare varieties I had sourced from specialist growers' plants that had taken months to acclimate to our climate. I knew they would likely die from neglect under the new management. The immediate aftermath was a period of isolation and grief. I moved into a small apartment, suddenly aware of how little I owned after years of reinvesting everything into the business. Confused clients called wanting to know why I had quit, having been told by Troy that I had chosen to leave to pursue other opportunities. I took a temporary manual labor position with a former competitor just to pay rent while I figured out my next move. For 8 consecutive weekends, I declined family dinner invitations, unable to face the people who had betrayed me so completely. Instead, I started keeping a journal documenting my journey through grief and anger toward whatever might come next. The seed of my new beginning came from an unexpected source. While purchasing supplies at a garden center, I ran into Mrs. Thornton, my very first client from years before. "Guadalupe," she exclaimed, "I heard you left the company." What happened? After listening to my abbreviated explanation, she nodded knowingly. "My sister serves on the Willow Creek Neighborhood Association Board. They're looking for a landscape consultant for their common areas. Would you be interested in meeting with them?" That referral led to my first consultation contract, providing design services without the overhead of equipment and crew. I borrowed office space from a friendly contractor to meet with the association board, pitching them on sustainable, low-maintenance luxury designs that would reduce their water bills while increasing property values. Within weeks, I had established Guadalupe Designs as a specialized consultation service focusing on high-end residential and commercial properties. My former foreman, Luis, contacted me after being fired by Troy, and together with 2 other ex-employees, we began building something new, smaller, more focused, and completely mine. Unlike my previous company, which handled everything from design to installation to maintenance, Guadalupe Designs specialized in creating sophisticated, sustainable landscapes that other companies would install. This model allowed me to focus on my greatest strengths while minimizing overhead costs. Within the first month, my profit margins exceeded my initial projections, proving the viability of the new business approach. A prominent industry blog featured my innovative desert-friendly design for a luxury home, bringing in inquiries from clients seeking something different from the cookie-cutter landscapes that dominated the market. I partnered with the local Water Conservation Authority to offer certification for properties meeting strict sustainability standards, creating an additional revenue stream through consultation services. While I was rebuilding, news of my old company's decline began trickling in. Former colleagues texted about paychecks bouncing. A supplier called asking if I knew why invoices under Troy's management remained unpaid after 90 days. Driving past previous installation sites, I noticed unmaintained landscaping, already showing signs of deterioration. Customer complaints appeared on social media about missed appointments and shoddy workmanship. Meanwhile, Troy was seen driving a brand-new luxury SUV parked conspicuously outside the struggling business warehouse that I had originally leased with such pride. The collapse accelerated rapidly. Westfield Properties publicly announced the cancellation of their 3-year maintenance contract, a major revenue source I had secured through years of relationship building. Equipment repossession notices appeared in county records as Troy defaulted on payment plans. Former employees filed wage complaints with state authorities after weeks of partial payments or completely missed payrolls. Troy's desperate attempt to save the business involved unsustainable price-cutting, underbidding competitors at rates that couldn't possibly cover costs. The short-term cash infusion couldn't address the structural problems created by his mismanagement. After months of silence, my father called one evening. His voice lacked its usual authoritative tone as he acknowledged some challenges with the business. Without explicitly asking for help, he hinted that the family was facing difficulties and that Troy was dealing with a lot of pressure. I listened politely, but offered nothing. The conversation ended awkwardly with my father saying he hoped to see me at Sunday dinner soon. 2 days later, a certified letter arrived requesting information about my former employment with the company. The letter referenced a multi-year audit focused on cash payment discrepancies that had begun after my departure. Reading between the lines, it appeared the IRS was investigating potential tax fraud. That evening, Troy showed up unannounced at my apartment, looking disheveled and distraught, a sharp contrast to the polished business image he had cultivated. He paced my living room, explaining that there were some accounting issues that needed clarification. "They're asking questions about cash deposits and contractor payments," he said, running his hands through his hair. "I need you to explain some of these transactions to the investigators." As he talked, I pieced together what had happened. After taking over the business, Troy had implemented tax strategies he claimed would maximize profits. These strategies apparently involved underreporting cash income, miscategorizing employees as independent contractors, and claiming questionable deductions for personal expenses. "Dad says you need to help with this," Troy insisted. "It's a family matter." I shook my head slowly. "I can't explain your decisions, Troy. I wasn't part of them." His visits became increasingly desperate as the investigation intensified. He offered to bring me back as partners with a 50-50 split. Later, he suggested selling the business and dividing the proceeds. My father attempted to mediate, emphasizing the importance of family reputation in the community. I consulted with my personal attorney, who advised maintaining complete separation from the company and its legal troubles. When industry rumors circulated about company assets being hidden to avoid creditors, I made the difficult decision to document all communications with my brother and father, protecting myself from potential legal entanglements. The final collapse came with a Chapter 11 bankruptcy filing that appeared in the Business Journal. The company name I had created, Guadalupe Landscapes, was now associated with financial failure and potential fraud. Former clients began reaching out to Guadalupe Designs, seeking replacement services for contracts abandoned by the failing business. When the auction notice for company equipment and vehicles appeared in the local paper, I felt a strange mixture of vindication and sadness. Troy issued a public statement blaming unfavorable market conditions and increased competition for the business failure, making no mention of the management decisions that had driven a once-thriving company into the ground. The IRS investigation expanded to include personal finances of the ownership, leading to a freeze on my parents' assets due to their connection to the business through my father's original investment. The situation they had created to provide for family was now threatening their retirement security. 6 months after starting over, Guadalupe Designs hired its third employee. We secured an exclusive contract with a luxury home developer known for environmental consciousness. My innovative rainwater harvesting system, the same one Troy had deemed unnecessarily expensive, won a state-level sustainability award, bringing valuable publicity to the new company. A regional landscaping magazine profiled the business as a comeback success story, contrasting my quality-focused approach with the cost-cutting methods that had become common in the industry. Through careful planning and a clear business model, I achieved financial stability without compromising the principles that had driven me from the beginning. My father made an unexpected appearance at a job site one afternoon, standing awkwardly among the native plants being installed at an upscale residence. His attempt at apology was clumsy, but sincere. "I thought I was doing what was best for the family," he said, looking older than I remembered. I was wrong. My mother called that evening in tears, revealing the extent of their financial strain due to loans they had extended to Troy to keep the failing business afloat. They had remortgaged their home and depleted their retirement accounts before the bankruptcy filing. After 11 months of separation, I received an invitation to Sunday dinner. The thought of sitting at that table again brought a flood of conflicting emotions: anger at the betrayal, sadness for what had been lost, and a small, persistent desire for reconciliation that I couldn't entirely suppress. Troy now faced potential tax fraud charges and community reputation damage that would make rebuilding difficult. He had been forced to sell his home and move his family into a small apartment, similar to the one I had retreated to after leaving the business. The healing process began with clear boundaries. I attended Sunday dinner, but declined discussions about financial assistance for Troy's legal troubles. Instead, I offered a job to my younger cousin who had expressed interest in landscaping, hoping to break the cycle of entitlement that had damaged our family. During a quiet moment on the porch after dinner, my father made a statement that felt like validation after years of seeking his approval. "You built something solid twice," he said. "That's more than most people do in a lifetime." When Troy eventually asked for advice on personal financial reorganization, I provided factual information without emotional entanglement. I made the decision to help my family personally while maintaining complete separation between my new business and their financial problems. The experience taught me the value of self-reliance over family entitlement. I came to understand that my skills and reputation transcended legal ownership of a company. They were assets that couldn't be transferred on paper. Walking away, painful as it was, had preserved my integrity and enabled new growth that might never have happened otherwise. I found peace not in seeking revenge or celebrating my brother's downfall, but in building something authentic that reflected my values. The relationships I formed with clients and employees were based on mutual respect rather than obligation or exploitation. Looking toward the future, I approached my new business with lessons learned from painful experience. I implemented a mentorship program for young landscapers from disadvantaged backgrounds, teaching not just design skills, but also business ethics and financial management. Family relationships cautiously rebuilt on a more equal foundation with boundaries that protected my independence while allowing for reconciliation. Through adversity, I became a stronger business leader and a more discerning judge of character. The collapse of my first company, though devastating at the time, created space for something more aligned with my personal values to emerge. I learned that true ownership comes from creating something of genuine value work that reflects your integrity and earns the respect of those who matter. Sometimes losing what you thought was yours opens the path to building something that truly belongs to you in every way that counts. Have you ever had to walk away from something you built? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real-life experiences. Remember, sometimes the hardest choice is the right one, and rebuilding can lead to something even better than what was lost. Thanks for listening, and may you have the wisdom to know when to stay and when to walk away.